friends, so this message is inspired by a conversation I had with a therapist a long time ago. For some reason, it was on my mind recently, so I thought I would share it in the hopes that it will help someone else as much as it helped me. This therapist and I were having a discussion about my tendency to want to fix things all the time. That equation, of course, included people, and I usually called that helping them. Even when I knew full well that you can only really help people who want to be helped. And some people don't want help because they don't actually think there's anything wrong with them or what they're doing to begin with. As far as fixing, well, you can't actually fix people at all. The best you can do is lend them some tools. But for some reason, I had a really hard time with understanding that in my early adult life. Anyway, the statement she made was brief, and even though it was, well over 20 years ago now, it has stuck with me since. And what she said was this: you have to make sure that helping someone isn't interrupting their karma. I thought about what that meant for quite a while after that conversation because, she wasn't wrong. And while the concept of karma is largely a spiritual one by definition, it is used very often in a secular way to explain the simple principle of life, that is, cause and effect. It's a relationship between two events where one is basically the reason for the other. So, in other words, if you touch a hot stove, cause, you will burn your hand, effect. If you drop a glass jar on the sidewalk, cause, it will smash into a million pieces, effect, and so on. In other words, your actions have an equal reaction. So, when you're a good person, good will return onto you. It's basically just being aware and intentional about what you do and how you treat other people. Because that's something you should do anyway. But for perhaps less altruistic reasons, you shouldn't do people dirty because that dirt is going to come back onto you eventually. So, getting back to us interrupting that process of people suffering the consequences of their own actions. Sometimes you think you're helping people with their problems, but you are actually doing the opposite. You are, in fact, enabling them. You are justifying or supporting problematic behaviors under that helpful guise. And when it backfires on you and the person keeps doing the same things, which sadly happens often, you're upset and mad and frustrated. The thing about that is, though, that you really did this to yourself, friends. I know that may sound harsh, but it's real talk. We don't do any other kind of talking on this channel, as you may know. Learning life lessons is a lot like taking a difficult test in school based on a homework assignment. Nobody else can study for you. It's something you have to do on your own, since that information is going to be stored in your brain. You're the one taking the test. So, if you're someone who's a fixer also, when you see someone you love struggling, you want to help them by doing things for them. Maybe you jump in and do that homework for them. That's great, but when the day of the test comes and they fail it, you really shouldn't be surprised. Of course they failed it. They didn't do the work. Now, if you apply that same logic to some other situations that may sound familiar to you, your adult child is about to get evicted from their apartment because they cannot manage money. So you jump in and pay their rent this month. Does that fix the problem? For the moment, yes. But for the long term, probably not. I mean, some people learn their lessons the first time and that's all it takes. But that is sadly the exception, not the rule. So chances are high that you're going to get the same call about lacking rent money again in the future. And you really shouldn't be surprised if you do, because just rushing in and solving the problem didn't actually solve it. It gave no incentive to that child to figure out a solution for themselves. You have created a safety net now where they think, I have no reason to learn how to manage money properly because my parents will just swoop in and save me if I blow it irresponsibly. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. The same goes for less tangible things, like making constant excuses for, say, your friend or your partner's anger management issues, or any other behaviors that people raise their eyebrows at. The longer you just paint over those things or make excuses for those people, the longer their behavior is likely to continue. Because again, why wouldn't it? There have been no repercussions for it, no facing of the music, so to speak. There's no incentive at all for that person to change anything or try to do better next time. So most people won't. I mean, it's kind of human nature to realize, hey, I got away with this or that once. I can probably get away with it again, so let me just try one more time, and one more, and one more. You know what I'm saying? So you might be thinking, okay, so what's the big deal? Everybody has a bad day. I would rather make excuses for someone I love when that's the case, instead of having them look bad. Or, I always try to save my loved ones from bad situations they get themselves in because I love them. Look, there is nothing wrong with that. Wanting to help someone we love is a perfectly natural thing. So is wanting to defend them. I mean, we all have our moments when we have not been at our best. And when that happens, we want people to give us a little grace and a little latitude. So, of course we want that for our loved ones too. But the things I'm talking about here are not one-offs where we're just having a bad day and we snap at the server for bringing us the wrong sandwich, or somebody cuts us off in traffic or whatever, and we follow them home so we can come back later and put some cat turds in their mailbox. While that last one is, a little psychotic, these kinds of things are not what I'm talking about when I said we might be interrupting someone's karma. I'm talking about things that are much more serious than that. I'm talking about behavior and unhealthy patterns that people fall into which they just cannot get themselves free from because somebody keeps coming to the rescue all the damn time. In our quest to be loving, helpful, and kind individuals, we will sometimes get in the way of people's important life lessons because we don't want them to struggle. But we're really not doing them any favors. All you end up doing most of the time is prolonging the inevitable and frustrating the hell out of yourself in the process. When you continuously save people from the natural consequences of their actions, you are showing them how to dodge responsibility and accountability. They are not learning what they're supposed to learn. And very often what also happens is that while you're busy intervening, some of that mess, for lack of a better term, ends up spilling on you too. And that isn't helping either of you. Look, sometimes you have to let people figure out their own way out of their own messes. You can be there for them, you can have empathy for them, you can be supportive and compassionate and all of the things, but you cannot completely step in and just take that over. That is not just disrupting your own karma, but you're basically becoming Sisyphus for the 21st century. If you're not familiar with who that is, Sisyphus is a character in Greek mythology who, after cheating death, was sentenced by the gods to roll a huge boulder up a big old hill for eternity. Of course, when he would be close to reaching the top, the boulder did what? Yeah, it rolled right back down again, because gravity. So it was the original exercise in futility, in case you ever wondered where that term came from. Every day is a school day, friends. Anyway, look, you cannot be the steward of someone else's ability to be responsible for their own actions and the consequences of those actions, because, well, you probably have enough responsibilities already, right? But also, you have your own accountability to worry about and your own growth to tend to. They have to be left to their own devices and do their own work. That is essential to their growth. They are never going to learn to ride that bicycle by themselves if you don't let go of the back of the seat. They are never going to learn to climb that mountain if you keep pulling them up every time they stumble on a pebble. They're never going to be able to achieve their goals on their own if you don't let them figure out how. And they are never going to learn how to save themselves if you don't stop swooping in and saving them. This may sound like something that you only do with kids or young people, but trust me, it's not. There are plenty of adults out here constantly making excuses for another adult's mistakes, bad behaviors, and whatever else, and it just adds to their dysfunction, for lack of a better term. You know, I often think about a friend of mine who, years and years ago, was a drug addict. I will call him Steve for example purposes. Steve was a super smart, talented guy, but unfortunately, that intelligence and that talent was hidden deep beneath the person that his addictions had turned him into. He was from a family that they weren't wealthy, but they had some means, and while he was living on his own for a long time, they were constantly bailing him out of jams. Some of them were very, very big jams. Then his mother, who was a sweet lady, but unfortunately his biggest enabler, passed away, and control of the family funds went to Steve's older sister. To make a very long story short, the sister was having none of Steve's nonsense. She pleaded with him to go to a treatment center and or to get help of some kind many, many times. He refused, so she cut him off financially and personally, too, which I know had to be incredibly difficult. That sounds harsh and insensitive, I know, but it was really the best thing that could have happened, and Steve will tell you this himself, because he could not keep a job. He found himself living on the street, all of his possessions in a duffel bag. At some point, he realized this was not the life he wanted for himself, that these people he hung out with, that introduced them to the drugs, those people didn't love him, and those substances didn't love him either, but his sister did. He hit rock bottom, and he came to her as a last resort. He's finally said yes to the help she was offering, and fast forward to today, he's married with 2 sons, he owns a house, and he's back to working in the career he loves. So, friends, listen, the savior complex is real, and we often think it's a good thing, but more often than not, it really isn't. Understanding where it comes from in the first place is a big step towards not having this always be our default setting, and I think it is for a lot of people. It comes from trauma, often our childhood experiences where we had to take on adult responsibilities way before we were ready, or it can come from not having someone save us when we really needed it. Those are not bad things necessarily, but it can really, really hinder both of us and the person that we're trying to save. The irony, right? This is a complex topic, and I am going to do a podcast episode on this in the near future. But for the purposes of this video, if you're struggling with this and you want not to be, here's what helped me tremendously, besides the therapist's advice, of course. Taking a step back and asking myself, besides my feelings about this person, why do I really want to step in here? Really? Because I want to help them? Or because I want to help me? You'd be surprised at how often the answer isn't them. This is especially true when we scramble to excuse another adult's bad behavior. Yes, we want to make excuses for them because we wish they didn't act that way. We also do it because we don't want to look bad. And pinning how others perceive us on someone else is a very, very slippery slope. Help people when you can, friends. I'll never tell you not to. But make sure that when you do, you aren't doing it to their detriment or yours. This takes work to figure out sometimes, but in the end, when they have learned their lessons and they have changed their behaviors, we hope, they will get to feel that win, that empowerment, that they are a cause over themselves and their own lives. And if they don't learn it and they just keep doing the same dumb stuff, well, then at least they won't be dragging you along with them. Either way, you will have a much lighter load to carry, karmic or otherwise. That's all I've got for you this week. I'll be back next week with another priority message. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Bye.